Today's guest and I met over 5 years ago in New York. She was part of a Raw Beauty Talks photo shoot that I did in partnership with Lush. And I don't know if you remember this, Nitika, but you came in and for anybody who hasn't met this woman, she just like radiates confidence and self-love. And you were having a hard day because you had a flare-up of your psoriasis. I could barely tell, but you were like, I almost canceled Erin. I was so nervous to come. And so I thought it was so full circle that we were having this conversation today, because now you've created, you've really found your passion and your purpose out of this struggle that you once had. Nitika is the founder of Chronicon, which is a media and events company. She has dedicated her life to elevating the lives of those who are living with chronic illness. She was diagnosed with psoriasis at the age of 10, and how do you say?
Psoriatic arthritis.
Psoriatic arthritis at the age of 19, and lived over 17 years of her life being defined by her conditions. We are going to chat about some tools that Nitika has for those of you who are struggling with chronic illness. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your personal experience with psoriasis and your journey?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all, Erin. And I do remember when we met, and I remember the heaviness of like me trying to carry this burden of navigating, wanting to, put myself out there, wanting to share a message, wanting to share my gifts, really, right? But also wrestling with this chronic condition, with two different chronic conditions. And that was something for a really long time that I dealt with all the time. And over the last, I would say 10 years, 10, 11 years, it's been a lot less, but I think there have been flare-ups. So when you and I met, that must have been like a flare-up time. And I was diagnosed, as you said, at a young age, 10 and 19, I got psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. And it really did define everything I knew about myself, which is part of why I'm so passionate about having a conversation about chronic illness, because a lot of times people will find a chronic illness chat group, or they'll find like a forum online or through their doctor. And it's often pretty negative and pretty depressing, honestly. A lot of times it adds heaviness to our experience because everyone's commiserating, right? And
Right.
I understand, even in the work that you do, right? Like with beauty and our body image, there's a lot of places where people commiserate. That's understandable. Sometimes people need that. But that's not really my vibe, So I'm like, let's honor the truth, which you do so beautifully. And let's honor the truth. I have a podcast too called The Point of Pain. We go right into the pain. We talk about it, but we also, I'm very passionate about honoring all that we are. So I might have two conditions, but I'm an Indian woman. I'm a New Yorker. I'm an entrepreneur. I love to sing. I love jewelry and like red lipstick. I have all these other things that make up who I am, right? So Chronicon, my company, and now we have the Chronicon community. It's really about celebrating all that you are. We had someone actually say to me the other day that whenever they open our app, they feel like it's a celebration, which is amazing. This person has fibromyalgia, depression, anxiety. She's going through so much stuff, but it really is a place, and we've tried to create a place for people to come and celebrate all that they are, no matter what they have going on with their bodies.
This is so incredible and so important, because I think when you're living with chronic illness, whether it's pain or a skin rash or skin condition that you've got going on, there's so many different things, Lyme disease, it can feel all encompassing. And it's like your body is constantly giving you these signals that something is wrong. So I understand why people can become so focused, and then you're in these chat groups and that's all everybody's ever talking about. For you, what was your experience like having psoriasis? Was it something that was just, in a very small part of your, on a very small part of your body? Is it something that was really visible?
Yeah, I had psoriasis for about 17 years, covering 95% of my body.
Yeah.
So you really couldn't look at me without seeing, psoriasis it's thick, it's like scaly skin essentially. And it itches like chicken pox. So I essentially had chicken pox for 17 years of my life. And then the psoriatic arthritis on top of that made it really hard for me to move. And just the skin alone, I always say it's almost like when your lips kind of crack and almost bleed in the winter, it's so uncomfortable. My entire body was like that for 17 years. So I still have some spots of psoriasis, but it's nowhere near what that was. And my experience was my greatest wound is out for everyone to see. And it created so much social anxiety, so much depression, so much insecurity, just over and over and over again. I had to deal with that in my life. And I think even if you have an invisible illness, because I've dealt with this also, even with when my psoriasis gets better, but I have the arthritis still and I'm moving
Right.
slow and I've got inflammation and lethargia and all these things, it's still incredibly challenging because there are all of these social implications, like social factors, things that are affected by the fact that I have to move through life a little differently.
Mm.
And I have to sort of announce to people sometimes, oftentimes, oh, I can't eat this. I can't go there. Yeah, we can go on this hike, but I need to take the easy hike. I can't do the extra, long hike. Things like that, that honestly, it is an emotional burden that we have to carry as people who are chronically ill. We have to constantly be training the people in our lives. We have to constantly be sharing our deepest selves and be so vulnerable. And I don't think everybody maybe realizes that if they don't have a chronic illness.
I don't think they do, and I don't think they can fully understand. However, there is always an opportunity to hold space. My husband lives with Crohn's disease, and you can't see it, but when he's having a flare up, he has to cut back everything that he's eating. He can be in a lot of pain. It can show up differently, different seasons, different times. It's really hard. And when somebody can't see what it is that you're struggling with, I feel like he also in moments has to come up against almost people feeling like people aren't believing him fully.
Yeah.
And I think that's really challenging as well.
It's so challenging. And even like in the era of, COVID-19 and all of this stuff, a lot of things that people were saying in the beginning of the pandemic were things like, oh, well, now all of the people in your workplace that are disabled or chronically ill, we've been trying to tell you for so long that, it really affects our nervous system if we have to rush to the office at a certain hour of the day. Or, these chairs are not comfortable for, the composition of our body or what's going on with our body, or just these different needs that we have, right? And a lot of times people who would stand up for themselves in those ways would really be looked at as difficult, as like, what are you, why this is different? I don't understand. Nobody else needs that. Why do you need that? So again, it's this emotional labor, and for people who have invisible illnesses, I think it is a different kind of challenge. I think they're both incredibly challenging, visible or invisible, but just in very different ways. And so there is a lot of training that you have to have. And it kind of sucks that we have to do that, right? Like part of why I'm so passionate about talking about this, and it's like I live, breathe, eat, sleep, think about chronic illness advocacy all the time. Because, there's 133 million people in the United States alone that have a chronic illness. And that number was based on the National Health Council's 2019 projection. I keep refreshing. They have not updated it for 2020 yet. Okay. So, because there's probably an exponential amount that has grown in the last year, especially with the pandemic. But so we're not a niche market, is what I keep telling people. But yet we're not being catered to, we're not being thought about, we're not being marketed to, we're not being included in fitness regimes, we're not being included in campaigns in the same way. So, Erin. we could have like a 2-hour conversation about this.
I mean, no, and I'm really hearing everything that you're putting down and thinking again about some of the stigma that is attached to these illnesses. And I'm curious to know, in the medical system,
Yeah.
if you were ever doubted and what you've come up against in regards to people being like, you need to cut out dairy and you should stop eating carbohydrates. And if you did this, your skin would be better, and go with an all natural product. I mean, what was your journey like actually figuring out something that would help the psoriasis? And where did you, like, what ended up working for you?
Yeah, it's honestly, it was an incredibly long journey. So without sharing every single detail, because that would take us like 7 episodes probably to do.
17 years.
Yeah, 17 years, exactly. And I've had the condition for 30 years. It was just really acutely challenging for 17. But what really, to answer your first part, yes, I did have so many people. I'm an Indian woman. The amount of Indian aunties and uncles that came out of the woodwork with like their turmeric and their magnetic blankets and their homeopathy, their Ayurveda. And I'm like, okay. And I was a kid, when all of this was happening. So I was just kind of like, all right, I guess I have to do this. A mud tea, and oh my God, so many things.
Mud tea.
It was so intense and awful. And with the visible illness, when my psoriasis was really bad, it would even get so bad as to like, I live in Manhattan. I would go into a taxi, and the taxi cab driver, if he was a brown guy, he would inevitably say, "What happened to your skin? Do you have some sort of allergy?" "Oh, I have a cream for that." While I'm sitting in the taxi, almost every single time for years that would happen, right? So that's problematic on so many levels, but it was emotionally really hard because I would often go into a taxi thinking, I'm having a great day. I feel beautiful. This is going to be awesome. And, then all of a sudden they remind me that I'm covered with psoriasis. So that's something that I am also incredibly passionate about in the Chronicon community. And even when we did our conference last year, we say no unsolicited advice. We are not prescriptive. We really try to honor, what's best for your body. And yes, I've had lots of ups and downs with that myself. You might have ups and downs where you need support, but we're not here to tell you how to run your medical treatment and your regimens, because we don't know your whole story, right? So that really comes from me having so many people. I mean, just the other day, I had someone DM me and say, "Oh, have you heard about celery juice and how it's like magical for psoriasis?" If one more person tells me that celery juice is going to cure me, I don't know what I'm going to do.
You should follow the medical medium.
That's what they always message me.
Like,
and
thank you.
I just deleted the message finally. I was just like, you know what? I used to just be nicer and entertain all of these messages. 2020, I just can't.
No.
But yeah, so really like the whole thing about, getting this this information to people and making sure that we honor all of these different cycles is about not giving unsolicited advice, making sure that we are not prescriptive. And in my own experience, I have definitely dealt with all of that. To answer what has helped, I personally think it's not a linear thing. I think food helps me. I think mindfulness really helps me. Yeah. My spiritual practice, I'm a very spiritual person. It is incredibly, incredibly important to my well-being. And ultimately, I ended up taking a medication that ended up helping me in that turning point moment that, got me from, I wasn't able to walk for about 6 years without severe pain. And 2 weeks after taking this medication, which I fought tooth and nail about, I didn't want to take it. I was so nervous. I was trying to manifest my health and that toxic positivity cycle that I didn't even know I was in. And 2 weeks after taking my first dose, I was skipping down the street.
Oh.
So, I kind of had this thought like, yes, I believe in manifestation, but I also believe in God. And I think God maybe made medicine for a reason. So maybe I should take some.
Wow. I'm so glad you just shared that. And I have an experience that mirrored it a little bit that I want to share right now as well, very quickly. I've talked about it on the podcast before, but I want to talk about very quickly my experience taking anti-anxiety medication. So after having my daughter, who's 3 now, I started to experience panic attacks. I have like skin rashes on my own head, just like severe anxiety, intrusive thoughts. And I was like, I'm going to meditate this and celery juice this and sleep this away. I was so resistant to the medication, right? Thinking, as we do sometimes in this industry, it becomes very, you're either Eastern practices or Western practices, you're either meditating or you're medicating. And so I was really resistant to it. And it is what I really think, it sounds dramatic, but saved my life and my family, was eventually taking that anti-anxiety medication. And it gave me the lift that I needed to be able to apply all of these other practices. So now I'm a huge believer that there is space for all of these different types of medicine, for the intuitive healing, for the medical healing, and that when we can start to combine all of these practices is when we really start to be able to experience something a lot deeper.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that. That's powerful. And I think there's so much shame around taking medicine.
Yeah.
And I don't understand where that came from and who started that. It makes me so angry because, there are people who have diabetes that, need insulin in order to live, right? And so does that mean that because they have their insulin or they need medication or people need chemotherapy to be able to fight cancer, that they're somehow less than because they need medical help? Absolutely not. And I think there's a really problematic conversation around that. Now, I also had to go through my journey of saying, okay, I'm going to take this medication, but being a spiritual person, I believe I really have to honor that this medication is here to help me. And I also want to take it upon myself to help myself too, and to help the medication work even better. So I just think of that as all of these other holistic things. They're only making the medication be able to work that much better in my body. I'm able to accept, the help that much more in my body. And that's great. Like, I think that's awesome. If that makes you feel good, that's awesome. But for people that have, really challenging conditions or in a really challenging spot, are having a flare up, or having a mental health crisis, there is zero reason why anyone should ever feel ashamed that they need medical support. That is why it is there. Again, don't get me started. I just could talk about this for 20 years.
I know. I feel like we could chat here all day long. So I'm curious to know, with your experience with Chronicon and having so many conversations in the field of chronic illness, what advice do you have? And I know you're not prescriptive or here to tell people how to do it, but for somebody who's listening, who's living with chronic illness and struggling to find their identity beyond that, struggling with the pain, the discomfort, the limitations surrounding them. Any advice for that individual?
Yeah, as you said, there's so many things that we could talk about. I think, narrowing it down to just a few is really helpful, because if you're in a chronic illness or a health or mental health crisis, you're probably already a bit overwhelmed as it is. So I actually think the first step is just to acknowledge how hard this is. And I really mean that, because I think, especially as women, we are taught to we've got to carry it all on our backs, right? There's so many of you out there listening that are mothers that are carrying your whole family. I'm single, but I, even as a woman of color, I feel like I'm carrying generations on my back. I just feel like that is so prominent in our culture with women. And we don't have to do that. And I think a lot of it is, we're not allowed to really be vulnerable and honest about how challenging things are, because we're thought to be, oh, we don't have it together. We're not strong enough. We're not powerful enough, or whatever. I really had a huge turning point in my journey when someone let me acknowledge this is not a small amount of pain and discomfort that you are holding.
Yeah.
And just someone saying that to me was genuinely like life-changing, because I really was trying to, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, I'm okay, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna be okay. It's like a lot of times when we're strong, we're much better in a crisis than we are like, with small things. I've also learned that. So with the crisis that I was going through, it was just like, okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, okay, this happened, I can't walk right now, no problem, I'm just gonna keep going. But acknowledging that this is hurting you, that this is making you sad. And it doesn't mean that you have to go down to the depths of despair that you're not going to get out. So I know sometimes when I talk about acknowledging and being vulnerable, people get nervous. Oh, well, if I do that, I'm never going to get out of here. But it's even just in a small moment. Hey, this is really freaking hard right now. Just putting your hand on your heart and just taking a moment when you're brushing your teeth or whatever, taking just a moment. And then I would also say, one of the things that I'm so passionate about with my work at Chronicon is breaking the cycle of isolation that specifically comes from living with a chronic illness. And I think this is true with most marginalized communities. My lens is a chronic illness lens, but even if you don't have a specific chronic illness, you might resonate with this if you're in a marginalized community of any kind. There is this burden that we have to carry, like we were talking about earlier, where it's like we are just automatically separate from everyone else. Like I'm the one with the psoriasis, with the skin condition. Everyone else is over there. Everyone else is fine or doesn't have this. So immediately, and that happened as soon as I was 10 years old, that happened, right, for the first time. It made me feel othered in a very significant way. So I think the journey of really getting into that isolation and starting to chip away at that is a hugely important thing. So some ways that you can do that are finding communities like your community, embracing your body, embracing how beautiful you are, whatever outlet you might resonate with the most, whatever access point you might resonate with the most, but starting to find and seek out communities. Also, just starting to tell people in your life that you're having a hard day in a way that, doesn't necessarily pass the burden on to them, but just lets them know, yeah, I had a really tough doctor's appointment this morning, actually, and it really was not fun. And so I told a friend, I was like, oh, rough doctor's appointment today. Like, how's your day going? It doesn't have to be a meltdown moment. It doesn't have to be a total unraveling, but just acknowledging this is a constant thing I'm dealing with in my life. I actually deal with it every day. Yeah. So this is what's going on today. So stuff like that, I think really helps to start to chip away at that isolation cycle, which perpetuates a lot of shame when you are in that cycle. So as you chip away at the isolation, you will also be releasing and diminishing the shame that you have, which I think is so important. And then the last thing I'll say is, self-love. I cringe halfway at saying that term because I feel like it has been so, just co-opted in so many strange ways. But we're gonna reframe it a little bit for you. So anyone who's cringing right now, just stay with me.
Hang with us.
Yeah, hang with us. So I started talking about self-love like 10, 11 years ago when I first started my work. And it was because my journey with self-love was really through the lens of my chronic illness. I saw people talking about self-love, like do a downward dog or get a $20 green juice or, go to a $40 spin class. Well, one, I can't do a downward dog because of my arthritis. At the time I had just gotten divorced, so I really couldn't afford a $40 or $20, item and just all the time every day, right? And I felt like there wasn't anyone talking about self-love in a way that was appealing and really targeting someone like me with my specific background and life experience. So when I talk about self-love, I say that self-love is being more committed to your happiness, to your peace, whatever that word is to you that brings you calm and serenity, than to your suffering in every single moment. So it is not about a grand gesture. If you can't get up right now, if you physically can't, if you emotionally can't get up right now, you are okay. You have the ability to access self-love even for 10 more seconds than you did yesterday. And I think a lot of times when people talk about self-love, it's a lot of pressure. It's like, you want me to do how many things today? I gotta get these crystals, and then I gotta pull some tarot, and then I gotta do a downward dog. I don't know who has time for this. I don't even have kids, and I don't have time for this. Okay. So I really had to be like, how are we going to have the person that was like me when I was lying in bed for a better part of 6 years and I couldn't get up and do all these things? How is she going to get self-love? And it was that moment to moment commitment. So it comes to getting to know yourself enough to know what are the things that bring you a little bit of joy, even just a little bit, sometimes a little bit of a lighter mood, make you laugh a little bit. It doesn't have to be this grand sweeping thing. But in every moment, if we can be in that commitment, if we can, try to access that, it will add up to a life full of love. But it doesn't happen with just one class. It doesn't happen with just, one green juice or whatever. It is a moment to moment commitment. So I remember when I was in bed for a lot of that time, I would watch like funny YouTube videos. I mean, it's so simple, right? And it's free. Okay. So that's like great. I'm such a nerd. I love stationery. So I would like get a really cute journal and just really luxuriate in, writing in my beautiful journal. I'm 39 now, almost 40. So I would really embrace the phone. It's like very 1999 of me. I know now everybody is on the phone and it's fine. But at the time, people were like, "Are you okay? Why are you calling me?" But just, make the commitment. I'm going to call a friend right now and just have some fun. So I think that I gave a lot of tips, but hopefully that helps you. Pick one thing. Don't get overwhelmed. Pick one thing that makes you feel, you know what, when I think about that one thing Nitika said, I feel a little bit inspired. So I'm just going to try that one thing,
I love this. I think you just spoke so eloquently and provided some really tangible tools that people can use, and a definition of self-love that feels that much more accessible, that much more as though anybody could pick it up and tap into it. And that's exactly, what we're here for right now. You don't need $1 million to be able to love yourself. You don't need a specific body. You don't need to be in perfect health. That shit is there for anybody to pick up. Everybody deserves it. Sprinkle it everywhere. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your story and opening your heart, and your time and your energy as well. Where can people connect with you if they want more Nitika in their life?
Well, thank you for having me. I loved what you're doing and your movement and all of the work you do for so long. And so it's an honor to be here. So thank you for having me. The best place to go is chronicon.co. And that's Chronic ON. So they're not two C's at the end. And our community is there. Our podcast is there. All the things are there. So check out chronicon.co and at Chronicon Official on Instagram.
We will make sure that we link to everything below. If you or a loved one is struggling with chronic pain, please take a moment to send the link over to them so that they can listen in. Let them know that you're thinking about them, that you understand what they're going through a little bit more than you did yesterday. And as always, if you have a moment to review the podcast, head on over to iTunes, find the Raw Beauty Talks podcast, leave us a review. I read every single one of them. They mean the world to me. You can also take take a screenshot and share this post tagging at Chronicon Official and at Nitika Chopra at Raw Beauty Talks, and we will regram those posts until next week. We'll see you then.